And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Becc Sahasrara, who's had a near-death experience due to trauma, which we're going to learn about and more. Becc, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Hi Jeff. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. I don't know if it was multiple NDEs or just one, but maybe we should kind of start around the time that this started happening to you.
I grew up in a very dangerous, violent situation. And that meant that there was frequent trauma. And so in the course of that trauma, I had approximately 3 NDEs at different ages until I got free from that situation when I was about 18. So the first experience that I had was I was around 6 or 7, and my body was being traumatized heavily. And I just remember at a certain point just being outside of it. I was just standing there looking at it. And I had a very you have this sort of detached feeling, or I did, this neutral feeling. And it was just like, oh, and in my child mind, I was like, oh, like, I'm here now. What has happened? And I felt very calm and fine. And then I noticed who I immediately recognized and knew as my spirit guides standing next to me. There was about 3 of them, these very beautiful, tall beings. There was a masculine energied one and a feminine one. And they just had this very strong familiarity, like family, like they'd always been there. And now I was just in the same room as them almost. And so they were sort of on my side, and I was like, oh, you're here. And it's kind of like I was talking to them, but no words were happening. It's more of almost like an emanation or like an impression that's passed, or telepathy. And my guides were just, for a few minutes there, they were just standing there with me, and I could still see the events going on there with my situation, with my body, but it wasn't affecting me at all.
Do you remember any of the conversation that you had with them?
Yeah, so first it was just this emanation of them saying everything's okay, and almost, I think, passing to me somehow I knew where I was and that I was okay. And then it kind of switched to being above my body. But it was the same little team of guides with me. But I also had a sense that we had moved kind of in this space, because this space it wasn't physical. It's hard to sometimes, when you talk about these things, it's hard to find the words, because you're almost just awareness in it. And then, so my spirit guides, then they were standing in front of me in this above place. And I could also sense almost a huge grouping of, I think now as an adult, I think now it was my ancestors and my family and things in that sort of heavenly, I don't know, ethereal place. But I could just sense them. I couldn't really see them, but I knew that they were there behind my guides now. And then these were my primary guides. And the one that I know as Samuel, he said to me, you don't have to go back. Do you want to go back? And it was him and the other feminine guide, and they were kind of asking me. So as far as what they said to me, that was the most important thing they said to me. And I knew that I had the option of letting the body die, and staying where I was. And I could feel almost like a concern feeling, not from my guides, but from the more human energies of those ancestors and stuff, like a grandmotherly vibe. And it wasn't like doubt in me or that if I went back, I wouldn't survive or I'd, not succeed in my life. But it was just an emanation of an impression of what I would be going back to, which was more danger and suffering.
Upon further examination of this later in your life, did you come to the conclusion that you signed up for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My life, uh, my now that a traumatic experience and having an NDE and being here with you, all of it is a gift. It sends a message of, going on and the remembrance of life and all of that. So it's very meant to be. And there were many times in my growing up in that trauma experience, because I grew up very psychic as well. I was a very psychic little girl, and I'm still a much more psychic adult now. And there were many times where, like, I could feel that my spirit guides were there, but they couldn't intervene they couldn't like save me, they couldn't like rescue me because there was this knowing that doing that would go against my highest will and my higher self's decision to go through this. Um, so they would often just be there and they would just hold me and hold almost like an energetic container for me to move through without crossing those holy boundaries, really.
Were you psychic as a result of your NDE, or were you psychic prior to your first one?
Prior. So I've been a very psychic, seeing and spirit and energy and auras and hearing people's thoughts and things ever since I can remember, like, so probably since I was born. And my spiritual team being in and out of my experience around me and, you know, being little and asking them questions and wanting them to rescue me and just, yeah, going through life with that awareness. So when I came out of my body, it was not an unusual sort of vibe that I was experiencing in this ethereal place. Um, Perhaps that contributed to my comfort there. Um, but yeah, so and then they were asking me, "Do you want to go back?" And we all get to, they ask. They're not going to send you back, or you get to choose in that sovereign direction of your life path. Um, And if we do go back and it feels like not a choice, it's because our soul actually chose. We may not have been consciously aware of it. Um, so I definitely chose experience. And yeah, to answer your question, like quite literally when they said, "Do you want to go back?" And then I chose to go back. And when I was little, I remember them standing in front of me and me being like, I can do it. Like I'm gonna do it. I had this energy of like almost like excitement, but it's like commitment to and motivation because I remember knowing that I was here to bring love and to bring the remembering of love and to others in this world. And that was so much more important to me, even when I was like 7.
I know you were very young, but did you
Yeah.
change it all as a result of that first NDE?
I think perhaps there was a little bit of extra strength that was given. Like as a little girl, you're not thinking like, oh, I'm these sort of adult concepts of extra strength. And I mean, like, because I got so in touch with that motivation in that moment with myself, when I came back to my body, I think it was supporting me to have more strength to go on, you know, even sort of unconsciously as a little girl. Um, but other than that, it didn't, as I said, and maybe that's because of the familiarity as well that I had and before that NDE, I had been taken out of my body, not quite into like an NDE experience, but having spiritual experiences of being out of the body or even like the spectrum of dissociation that people go through when you have a severe trauma, even someone in a car accident or something, they'll sort of feel a disconnect, and I see it like a spectrum of how disconnected we get from the present and from the body, if that makes sense.
Do you think you got any other abilities from that first NDE?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. I had everything sort of full blown like from the moment I was here, I think.
All right, so you came back to your body, and
Yeah.
then I don't know, life went on as usual
Yeah.
until how many years later you had your second one?
I was about 12 or 13. So 6 or so years. Um, yeah, and so in that experience again, I was going through quite a severe trauma, abuse that was happening. Um, and my body just wasn't coping. Um, and in that one, it was a lot more like I'm just this awareness. Um, what I remember is being in the trauma moment and then being in um, this incredible, so difficult to describe, rich white light place that felt like the richest peace that I've ever felt. And it was like everywhere, and I was it, and like I didn't have a concept of like I'm a body or I'm a little soul or I'm talking to somebody or anything like that. I just was I just was in the isness of that peace energy, I guess. And it was incredible. Um, yeah, and sort of felt like home as well. And in that situation, um, I was basically actually kind of going in and out of like being, really, and I feel that, yeah, of being so disconnected from my body. Like I was in the peace place and then I was in the trauma, and then I was in the peace place and then I was in the trauma. Um, and that was really difficult, because each time I came back, it was like almost extra painful because of just the richness and having been in that more pleasurable, amazing home, safe light. Um, Yeah, I'm even though there wasn't a lot like of talk and spiritual beings interaction, I'm aware, and I had a knowing and have a knowing that I was in this godlike field, I guess, and that I really, easily could have fully died in that experience.
Do you feel like the white light was a place of healing?
Yes, it was a place of healing, a place of um, the God force. I think, yes, to heal me, but also just very like logically and within the mechanics of the universe. That's just one place that your soul may vibrate to and go to when you are that far gone into those different levels of like being alive and being in death. Um, and when it gets really like there's no words and we're just awareness and or very heavenly and things like that, that's when we're pretty nearly like crossed over, or we some people they've crossed over and but then they get sent back. Um and yeah, I think that I was sort of in that position, and I think doing that or being having had that experience, I think it was also meant to give me a taste of that peace energy so that I could cultivate it in my own heart, in my life, now, here and now, you know, which is what I did when I, so in trauma healing, I did a lot of therapy and things. And in part of that process, you go back and not always, but often we go back and we re experience the trauma so that the brain can reprocess it. And we have to be with the physical sensations that we disconnected from. This is like called trauma processing. So when I did that process with this trauma, with this NDE, there was also a huge layer of like a really deep grief that came on from that experience of not being in that place, but knowing what it was like, and also sort of the torturous experience of coming in and out. And it was contributing to like a huge resistance to life that I had even when I was free, and in therapy and healing. But the gift of that is that I eventually, after processing and working with my spirit guides and my higher self, doing the alchemy work, I was able to learn how to hold that peace frequency or energy in my heart and in my body. And it kind of settled into me and replaced the, the trauma and the darkness, and, got a piece of my soul in that way, or a piece of God in that way. So I think that's why as well.
When you were going through this trauma therapy, did you mention to your therapist that you had an NDE? And if so, what was their reaction?
Yeah, I did. My therapist is really, really beautiful because she's very 3D and mental and an amazing healer, but also open spiritually. And when we were processing that memory, and she just, she was just like, "Oh, that doesn't surprise me, given what you've described happened to you," you know. And she, and more with another one that I had, she sat there with me, and that's what the therapist is doing, is just holding the grounding for you and guiding as you heal yourself. Um, so yeah, I don't think she was surprised. She was like intrigued and interested in things, and it was probably a rare thing, but maybe not as a therapist who sees extreme trauma survivors. I actually didn't ask her that.
Now, you had one more or more than one more NDE?
Oh, near death experience
Mhm.
wise, I had one more
One more,
as
okay.
well.
Let's fast forward to
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. So that was when I was like 15 or 16, something like that. Um, I once again was in a traumatic, violent situation, and uh, I, the beginning of that is me remembering that everything went black, um, and then after this initial blackness, I found myself in that. This one I really struggle with the words sometimes, so bear with me. Um, because I became like just this pure awareness. Awareness is the best word I can give, where you don't have a body. But in this one, I also um, pretty much lost the concept of I or my ego, like Becc. That was all gone. And I just was somehow. Um, and I was in this vast um, black space that some people might refer to as like a void space. Um, but I do like to give a picture to people to liken it to space, but like the universe. Like if we were out in space, like really far from our solar system, you would be in awe of this incredible rich blackness. It would feel very vast. There's almost an emptiness to it, but it's expansive. And it was so still and silent. There's no sound in space. It was the most incredible silence and stillness that I've ever touched. And it wasn't scary. It was just, I am here. It was very neutral. Now I think it was quite beautiful. And I was just there, and I remember almost, I guess there was a sense of waiting for a few minutes, though I don't know what time was actually doing. Um, and then in the far, like in this black space in the distance, I was seeing this little white light, and it looked like a really far away star. Um, and it was really, really tiny, but it started to get a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter and a little bit bigger and a little bit closer in that way. And it was just sort of ebbing and flowing and growing a little bit. Then, when it didn't get that big, and it was still quite far away, everything went bang. And it seemed to explode. I didn't see an explosion, but everything would describe it as like a bang. And then everything was white. And then again, like I was the white light. And it was different than this other one, which had more, that earlier NDE had, the white light had this very tangible quality of peace energy and beauty. this was very neutral. It was very like how I relate to the God force or source, which is this essence of just isness almost. It just is. And um, I feel like this is where the words that I, I was already super dissolved in my ego and everything. And then when the white light bang happened, it's completely gone. Like I can't even put words to it. Like I just remember the white light, but I was not existent. But I guess I was, you know, because I'm alive. I don't know. Um, yeah, and it was that stillness and that neutrality and that isness is like um, the core of life substance, I feel. It's what we all are beyond the layers of the individual soul and individuality. It's this light essence or God that is the substance for everything. And I was there for a little bit, I guess. And then I came back, I guess. I was back in the traumatic experience.
It sounds like to me you experienced the death of the ego while in the
Mhm.
black void. And then when you went to the light, you wouldn't even say I am. It's just am.
Yeah, it just, yeah. And that's the one where I feel, given my awareness now and my knowledge of spirit and everything, that's where I feel like I must have died or gotten like extremely to the edge of it, you know, um, because of how deeply my soul essence was dissolved.
Do you feel that the black void is a realm outside of all the other realms? Like outside of this earthly realm, outside of the white one, the godly realm, maybe even other realms that exist. It's like a pause or
Mm.
like, a separation from everything.
I think that it could be in that way. I think what I think what we're getting into is sort of like the substance of the universe. And so it's, I would say, realm or like one layering, right? So, and within metaphysical mechanics and things, we have like the void space or the womb space that is like that. And then the emanation of the light, it's like the protruding light, and then, you know, over time it becomes dense and then it becomes form. And that's sort of the mechanics of manifestation or birth in this universe. So I think that it is a realm that I was in, but it's also just what substance is your consciousness or soul meeting with or remembering or being saturated in. And I think that that could be used in all sorts of ways. Like, I'm sure there's been, like, for example, like I think someone might have an NDE and they are in a void space, and it's kind of, it could be like what you said, where it's like a pause and stuff, and then you go back. It's like how we're using the material or that substance. You could experience it in a lot of ways.
If we step back and look at the big picture, what was your purpose for enduring all this trauma?
Mm. Hmm. It's a beautiful question. Um, the intention, the life intention or purpose that I had was to go through a process of intense injury and suffering to the all the bodies, the spiritual body and energy and the physical body and the mind, um, so that I could learn and experience and remember how to do the repairing of that, how to do what I call alchemy, which is all healing is, where you change your state from grief to joy, from, pain to love. We're all doing this kind of alchemy in different tools and exercises in our practice. My journey took me into obviously severe PTSD, and I had dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder, from the severity of it. So I was like at the extreme end of being traumatized. And, you know, a lot of people might say that I wasn't going to make it, and it was very, very difficult. But by going through that, I had to learn how to put myself back together. And I had to go, eventually, I had a lot of sort of miraculous moments. And I realized I had to go inwards into my spirit. And by going inwards and listening to my intuition and connecting with my soul or higher self, that is how I healed myself. I taught myself, or I was taught by spirit and ascended masters and the guides around me, how to weave my soul light back into my body and into my consciousness and do alchemy or remembrance of the soul. And now I teach that to other people. And I don't think you can't teach what you haven't lived, you know? Um, and what my intention of also having such a like extreme story and things like that is that it acts as a prayer of love for the world that says, hey, like you can go through the most extreme trauma, you can be in the most extreme darkness, but love always is, and that light all inside of you always is. And I think my life was a gift to reflect that so that I could become the woman I am today, sitting here on a podcast with you, hopefully sending this message of light to anybody and everybody who's listening, you know, that you can always remember who you truly are beyond pain or suffering, always.
How do you define God?
For me, I feel if I'm going to use the word God, it's in reference to this this one light or one substance, soul, energy, life force that we are all intrinsically made up of. It's at the very foundation of even like the unique soul. And then beneath that, what's charging that is the life force or the God spark. Um, and so, God, in that way, it is life force, it is the creator, it is everything, it is like you, it is me, it is the plants, it is the animals. Life is God.
Do you fear death?
No, I think I think my human level, like let's say, I think my human fears, like any human, uh, having an experience of any sort of severe pain or suffering, like that the body might go through the death action or the death on the physical level, you know. Of course, probably wouldn't be totally fine if someone was about to like, hurt me or something. I wouldn't be like, don't worry about it, I have a human nervous system that's going to react to that and the survival response. Um, However, I do feel that, and I like to think that in that situation, I would also have a really deep inner strength to draw on, um, to because I know that I can live through any sort of pain or suffering, basically, and that I'll get through it. And if I die, that it will be meant to be, and it will be perfect and beautiful. And dying is really easy. It's so easy and it's so beautiful, and it's well, not every layer. Some people have different layered experiences and mixed experiences, but the act of dying is easy. I think that survival is, and choosing to heal as well, was always the hard part.
During any of your NDEs, or actually the events leading up to it, did you ever surrender to death?
I think perhaps, I mean, maybe I did, but perhaps not consciously because it happens so fast, basically. Like 1 minute you're here and the next minute you're in this other place.
Is that like it's instantaneously?
Yeah, yeah. And then let me think. And then I guess in the one with the back and forth and the peace feeling, I was very surrendered to that, in that I was like longing to die and I couldn't. And that was the real challenge and trauma with that. Another layer of trauma with that was wanting to cross and not being able to because I kept being brought back. Um, and then I'll just on your question on the third one with the void space, in that trauma experience, before I went into the void space and stuff, there was a layer, like when I was still in my body and living it, where I knew that I was maybe going to die, and I resisted a lot. And I had a whole thing and a whole healing journey about the resistance that I initially was in before the black and everything. So it's true, you need to surrender to death.
Are you still in contact with your guides?
Yeah, yeah, they've been there every day of my life, and they
In,
still are.
in what way do you communicate with them?
So I hear them as like it's not quite a physical voice. It's not doesn't quite sound like you and me, but it's sort of hard to describe. It's almost like this in between thing. Um, yeah, I hear them, I channel them, which is where you can move your consciousness out of the way, and they are in the forefront of your consciousness. So I might speak the channeling, I might write, something. Um, I see them clairvoyantly in the inner lens and externally. Um, yeah, so all the psychic, the clairs, and I also communicate through claircognizance, which is where you just know, like, oh, I just know that my guide wants me to know this thing or stuff like that.
Have you come to learn who they are and where they're from over the years?
Yeah. So spirit guides are, I would call like the spirit guides I'm talking about, I would call them your primary guides or like your inner circle kind of. And we all have these a handful of primary guides. Um, and they are actually aspects of your own oversoul or higher self. Um, and at the same time, they're an individual entity, but they're actually a part of you. And when we heal and we increase our vibration and become more in a higher consciousness, we integrate them, and they still act and serve in that way. Um, but it's almost like it can do both. So they are me in different levels of consciousness in different, you could perceive some of them in different lifetimes, expressed, this the me that was expressed in like fill in the blank lifetime. But truly, they are each like one petal of my soul's, entirety.
Well, you call them primary guides. Are there
Yeah.
secondary guides as well
Yeah.
that are
So,
not you? Or,
yes, exactly. Yeah. You have your primary guides would be the aspects of you that you and your soul chose, like, okay, for the themes of this life and this life intention, it's going to serve me to have this like incarnation of me, or this spirit guide and this one and this one. It's like because of the nature of their wisdom that they hold. Um, and then I would say like your outer circle could be like other guides from like not your own lifetime, just other higher ascended beings. Sometimes these can be family members or lineage, ancestor. Um, and then even just one step out of that could be the ascended beings we call like ascended beings or teachers in spirit, ascended masters, goddesses beings, which are more what they're expressing is larger amounts of archetypal consciousness of human consciousness. And we all also have like at least one like primary ascended master being, which, for example, for people to understand, could be like Yahweh or Jesus, it could be the Buddha, it could be Mary Magdalene, it could be another Indian god or goddess. These are really, they're more like, if we take away like a human projecting onto them, they're more like forces in the universe that work in a very collective way. So you also have a primary, at least one primary ascended masters. And then those outer circle beings, all of those, they change, they can shift and change as you go through your life. And you might need more of a masculine guide or ascended master at one point to integrate some like masculine lessons more than a feminine. They'll sort of not always stay with you, and then they'll come back, or then they'll be done and another guide will come on. But your primary team are always with you for the entire incarnation.
After you finish this lifetime, are you coming back here again?
My sense is probably. My sense is that it's not fully decided right now. It just on my very human level, there's a part of me that feels that sense of mission and is like, oh my goodness, of course I would come back because look at all the love and magic that's needed here and the remembrance. On another level, if the universe or God force or the light within me decided for me to serve better in a higher state or something, then I would.
Have you ever considered that the trauma that you endured was paying off karmic debt?
I had considered that, yet at the same time, I'm reluctant to even call any of our karma a kind of debt because it implies this notion of like a punishing system. And it's actually not like that. It's actually our choice as to like what lessons we want to learn. So, and they're filled with shadow and light experiences, and they have to be for you to learn something. So, very much so, like, sort of yes, but sort of no, if you know what I mean. Like, absolutely, my soul was like, let me have that, and let me integrate that lesson from that other past life where I didn't fully get that subject of like how to be compassionate. So, let me go through this now so that I understand and can embody the vibration of compassion because that's really going to serve me and my soul's development and the entire world. It's very beautiful and it's very neutral. Um, and it's a beautiful school of learning. Um, and then also, I would just to fully answer your question, say that especially when people go through extreme traumatic situations, not always, but I know for my soul, there was an element of taking on collective trauma or karma as well, um, that a soul could choose to, I guess, activate in their lifetime as well. Manifesting a very difficult experience that would cause me to do so much healing means that I get to do a lot of healing potentially for the whole collective. If some of those experiences weren't done from my soul of like, let me do this for my soul development, they were created for, let me do this so that I can give this light back to our earth. Let me take that on intentionally as almost a sacrifice, but it's a very beautiful thing. And there was definitely a huge component of that for me and a lot of people who go through the kind of extreme trauma I went through and then they end up as teachers. It's because the soul's taken on a service to humanity as well.
If you had a friend that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what kind of advice would you give?
I would, I mean, on one level, I would just be present with them and I wouldn't try to give them any advice because when you're grieving, advice is not. Often there's nothing to do and there's nothing to say, and it's just to be with the experience and the loss. Um, if I was going to say anything, um, it would be that I would invite them to just really feel it, really let yourself feel it, and know that it will just get a bit lighter and a bit lighter and a bit lighter every time you do. And one day life will feel light again. And that when people are out of grief, not when they're in grief, because often it not always, but often it doesn't serve people when they're grieving to be like, don't worry, they're in heaven. Like it's fine. Like when you're really lost someone, you're in pain, that can be so invalidating emotionally. So later, I might say, well, I had this experience of death and it was like this and it was really beautiful. So, I trust that your friend or your partner they're okay and they're with you and they love you and their radiance lives on.
I think there are a lot of people out there that would say, how could I sign up for so much suffering? Or how could somebody sign up for all this trauma? Why would we do that? What would you say to that?
I would say, if you're asking that question, you're in pain about it, right? So don't try to bypass that pain by looking for like light answers and things. Let's be real and authentic that you're kind of like unhappy with that situation. I would say to feel that that is valid. It's a normal human response. It's okay. And then I would say that the higher spiritual answer is for love. We do it, I took on a lot of that trauma because I love this world so much. And I felt that when I was 7 in that moment, the love that is more real and rich than any like fears or human things that we think are, bad or wrong. That love surpasses everything, that motivation. So your soul was like, I love life. Like I am love, I am made up of that love. And so let me go to experiences where there is darkness and let me radiate that incredible love that I am because I love everything, because everything is me. And also because of the beautiful lessons that you get from that experience, the gifts that duality gives us that we wouldn't be able to have if you were just chilling out in the higher realms. You know, you can't learn wisdom or compassion without going through something, without having a human experience. And how would our world be if we didn't have those things, you know?
In the information about you, it talks about how you teach what it means to live a life of deep magic. How do you define that?
Love magic. So for me, magic is that alchemy that I mentioned earlier. Again, it's sort of an interchangeable word with being able to change our state from like powerlessness to empowerment, from the grief to joy. And also, when I say magic in that context, I'm also talking about awakening and utilizing our multidimensional capacities, our intuition, our psychic development, and learning to so I teach people to live your life from this real soul connected place where you can actually like hear or be guided by your higher self or your soul, and have intuitive insights and things. And that comes from my experience of going through so much and healing it, and um, my intuition being the only thing that I relied on. Um, when you develop that capacity, you become the powerful embodied soul that you're supposed to be. Like, I really believe that we're supposed to be magical beings and we're not meant to live here like confused and like, oh my goodness, like, and just in our mental mind. Because, like, who would you be if you were living by that inner magic where you could touch your soul and you could feel your soul and you could have a spiritual guide team with you saying, what about this, or helping you heal it. It's how they're there to help you navigate this life, and you are a magical person, like just by the way that you're a soul. So I love to teach people about how to actually live like that.
Can you give my audience some practical exercises to awaken their multidimensional capacities?
Yes, yes. So the first one I would say is learning how to drop into your heart, or your heart space, or your heart energy. Because the heart is, on the metaphysical level, it's like the seat of the soul. It's kind of like a container structure for the soul light. And when we come into the heart, you always want to start learning intuition with your heart, because if you're in your heart, you're in a good, healthy vibration, and you're only going to experience intuitively healthy light beings and, psychically. So, um, to come into your heart space, the practice would be to get comfortable, get a little bit meditative, put music on if you want to. You want to drop into a space where your mind is somewhat still. And once you feel a bit settled, um, to bring your awareness and your presence, your attention to this physical space on your body. You might put your hands here if that helps you focus. You might imagine breathing the breath into the heart, in and out, if that helps you focus. Um, uh, or you might just be sitting there and intending it. And I like to almost kind of like imagine that I move my consciousness from like my brain to like here. I almost like send it down into here. And then spend time here. It's going to sound a bit boring, but we want to sit in this heart space and get familiar with it. The longer that you do it, the more over time, what will start to happen is you'll notice like certain feelings, or maybe like a color comes to mind, or these your clairs, your intuition, impressions will start to come in to your awareness. Um, and that's the beginning step that can then develop into like fully having like a multidimensional, I'm seeing this image and I'm talking to this guide and da da da, with a good, healthy foundation. So that's the first practice that I would give. Um, the other is when you're doing that for a little while, then the fun one is to ask your primary spirit guide just through your mind or intention. Say, I intend that I connect with my primary spirit guide. And being in that stillness and that waiting mode, almost receiving mode, just see what happens. Again, they'll come through your intuitive capacity, which is all the clairs. So you might get an inner vision in your mind. You might just have a knowing, like, oh, I think that it's a male. You might have a like warm feeling on the left side of your body. This depends on what your natural primary clairs are. We often are sort of built with like one or two of them more strong in us naturally. Um, just like some people are, a great artist, and some people like me cannot draw at all. So it's like developing those. And just by doing that, and then if you want to, you could take notes about what you're getting, maybe after, if you find note taking disruptive. It's a practice of concentration, of clarity, and just have fun with it.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can, you can go to becsahasrara.com and there's a contact form there. You could also go to Facebook. My name is Becc Sahasrara. It's a profile, and you can like send me a friend request or send me a message, and we can chat.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah. So I am just about to launch a membership platform, which is called the Ascension Club. Uh, and it's a private space where we're going to be doing monthly classes, channeling all the teachings and all the things that I do in one place, outside of YouTube and things like that, where we will meet monthly, and you'll be with an amazing community of like-minded people who are on the spiritual ascension, embodiment, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, journey. And yeah, we get to interact and you get to ask questions to me. Like basically, I'll do a channeling or a class, and then you can ask your own personal questions to me about it. You can also post in the boards, the community online, like your questions. And I'm in there like chatting and responding. And it's just a really cool, magical space. So I'd love for people to check that out. If you want to know more, just follow me on Facebook or sign up on my website.
Your YouTube channel is named after you?
Yeah. Yes, my YouTube channel as well. That's where you can get free content about all of these different topics. It's just Becc Sahasrara. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
You who are watching this, as you're hearing all of this like amazing information and maybe wondering about death and thinking about and everything, I would just invite you to ask yourself the question of what is in this for you that makes your life better? What can you take away from these experiences and live better? Because death is really there to inspire you to live an amazing, beautiful life. And the near death experience is to tell you, like, it's going to be okay. And there's magic all around you. And my positive message is more of that question. And also just to remind you that you have all of this magic and all of this cool NDE stuff and everything that you are getting out of it. It's all inside of you already. You are such a spiritually powerful, amazing being who came here with such an intention. Even if you don't know what it is, doesn't matter. you're so loved and you're so divine and you're so it's just such an amazing art piece of the universe. And thank you for being here.
Becc, thank you for your message and thank you for being my guest.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.